Good morning, everybody. My name is Terry. I'm one of the pastors here, and if it's your first time, welcome. We're really excited that you decided to be a part of our church today. As we continue this message series entitled Here We Go, and to catch you up to speed, because we've been talking about this for the last couple of weeks, let me just briefly catch you up. What we're talking about, isn't it true that as we approach the new year, we always set these resolutions and these goals, and we have really high aspirations, but then all of a sudden the calendar clicks to January 21st, and we look and go, how am I doing? And many times we get back to the same old patterns, the same old routines. And so instead of here we go, I'm going to have a better family life. I'm going to have a better spiritual life. I'm going to have a better financial life. And instead of that, we say, well, here we go again. I'm doing the same things that I once did before, and maybe 2024 is just going to be the same. Well, if that's you, we've been talking the last couple of weeks. In fact, the first week we talked about the importance of our spiritual life, and we gave you some practical tips and principles to be able to hold on to be able to withstand all the pressures of the patterns of life. Last week, Pastor Aaron did a great job of talking about what it meant to have community and to be a part of a group, but also to serve together and to find community in that way, and that could be a way to really make 2024 different. And today, I'm excited as we turn our focus, while the focus is on us, but we turn our focus to all that God can do. Do we really believe that He is the creator of the universe? Do we really believe that He can do all things? And if you're like me, you're going to be challenged today by the word that God has given. I'm excited, the teacher in me. If you thought I talked fast, get ready, because I'm really excited because I've never preached from this passage of Scripture before. And it really is an amazing story. If you're new to Christianity, you're going to love it. If you've been a Christian for a long time, you probably never heard it preached on. And today, I think you're going to find a lot of value in it. But let me kind of set it up for you a little bit. We're going to a place in the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, we see a lot of history, biblical history of the Jewish people. We're going specifically to talk about some kings throughout Jewish history. And at a time in the Old Testament, the Jewish people split. They split into two kingdoms. And right around Jerusalem, on the northern side, they split into what we call the kingdom of Israel. And the southern side, they split into what we know as the kingdom of Judah. It gets confusing when you're reading through the word. Sometimes you're like, wait a minute, I thought there were one people. They are, but they split. And what you're going to see is we're going to talk about these two kingdoms. We're going to talk about the old king of one of the kingdoms and the two kings that came to follow. And we're going to follow their journey, and we're going to learn a lot about what God has to say. So we're going to turn to 2 Kings chapter 3, beginning in verse 1. Here we go. It says, Joram, son of Ahab. Now pause there, all right? Let me give you some history. Joram, he is the king of Israel, the northern kingdom. Now, his father was a guy by the name of Ahab. Ahab was not a good guy, okay? In fact, it said he did so many evil things, just terrible things. However, who was even worse than him was his wife, Jezebel. By the way, if you ever get called to Jezebel, I give you permission to fight. No, don't do that. You can't do that in church. But being called to Jezebel is a really bad thing because she was evil. Man, you thought that Ahab was evil. She was worse. And so you had Ahab and you had Jezebel, and they were not doing things to honor God at all. They worshiped a whole lot of other gods. They did terrible things. And so it was really dark history for the kingdom of Israel. So their son, Joram, he becomes the new king. And it says, Joram, son of Ahab, became king of Israel in Samaria in the 18th year of Jehoshaphat. Now, Jehoshaphat is the king of Judah. He is the king to the south. Now, the thing you need to know about Jehoshaphat is he was a good guy. Jehoshaphat followed the ways of the Lord, believed in the ways of the Lord. Little side note here, you've probably heard the name Jehoshaphat. Some of you have heard the term jumping Jehoshaphat, right? You've heard of that? Well, this is the guy. And now you might say, well, Terry, where does this come from? This isn't in the notes. It's just free, okay? Just useless information for you to just talk about today. But Jehoshaphat, the reason why they call it jumping Jehoshaphat is back during a time in the United States history, believe it or not, individuals, they wanted to have a phrase that they didn't consider was a curse. So they decided to say, instead of some things, they said, jumping Jehoshaphat. Well, where that comes from is in the Midrash. Some people believe in the Midrash, which is the verbal historical account of the Jews. In the Midrash, it states that Jehoshaphat, because he loved the Lord, when he would see Jewish theologians or Jewish teachers, he'd be really excited because he loved hearing from them. And it says that he would often jump off his throne in excitement. Jumping Jehoshaphat. There you go. Useless information, but I figured I'd throw it at you. Anyway, Jehoshaphat was the southern king of Judah, and he reigned for 12 years. So now you got the kings. Joram, the northern king, did evil in the eyes of the Lord, but not as his father and mother. Remember Ahab and Jezebel? So it says Joram did evil, but not like mom and dad. He got rid of the sacred stone of Baal. Baal was a god of thunder, god of lightning. He was a god that they worshiped. And so he got rid of a stone that was dedicated to Baal that his father had made. However, nevertheless, he still clung to the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat. Now, Jeroboam was another family member who learned from dad. So he clung to the family traits of not following the Lord, which he had caused Israel to commit. He did not turn away from these evil things. Now, okay, Mesha. Mesha is the king of Moab. Now, Moab, pause. So you got the northern king, Joram. You've got the southern king, Jehoshaphat. Joram's bad. Jehoshaphat's good. Now you got another king, and it's called Moab. If you read about the Moabites didn't believe in God, didn't like God, hated God. They did all kinds of things to not like God. However, Ahab, he was so wicked that he got along with this guy. And they looked at one another and said, hey, you and I, we get along. We're a little more powerful. Ahab said, look, you think I'm bad? You should meet my wife. And you don't want to mess with my wife. So I'll tell you what, we're going to play nice and we're going to get along, but you need to bring an offering every year to me. And as long as you bring an offering, I won't sick my wife on you, all right? And the king of Moab said, yes, please. I don't want to deal with that. I'll bring you some cattle. I'll bring you some rams. We're good. Now watch what happens. Mesha, king of Moab, raised sheep, and he had to pay the king of Israel a tribute of 100,000 lambs. That's how mean Jezebel was. 100,000. That's a joke, by the way. Just keep up, people. 100,000 lambs and the wool of 100,000 rams. Now, what I love about this is that you see Joram. And it says that, you know what? He learned a lot from mom and dad. He didn't do things exactly alike, but he still did a lot like mom and dad. Isn't it true that in our lives we learn a lot from those that go before us? Now, I'm going to excite some of you and disappoint some of you. For those of you that love mom and dad, that think mom and dad are the greatest thing since sliced bread, they were an amazing, incredible parents, and you just hope to be like them one day, you're going to like this. For those of you that don't like your parents, or maybe your parents made mistakes, and maybe you're really, really bitter with them and everything else, you're not going to like this. It is much harder to not be like mom and dad than it is to be like mom and dad. As you get older, you're going to find yourself saying things, doing things, and you're going to go, gosh, I sound like my dad. Gosh, I sound like my mom. It happens. You're going to become a lot like mom and dad. And that's what happened to Joram. Joram did evil in the eyes of the Lord because he learned that from mom and dad, and he was wicked. Now, the case in point. If you grew up in my home, my dad grew up in the latter parts of the Great Depression. And so he was a very value-conscious person. I'm a very value-conscious person. I will fight tooth and nail for $1 on the cable bill, okay? That's me. Now, in my home, in my dad's home, in his garage, he had about 30 of these jars. And I'm going to shake it, and I want you to hear the noise. And when I open these jars, some of you can relate, in this jar, I've got random nuts and bolts and screws. Some are rusty, some are new. There's no rhyme or reason. They all just sit in this jar. Now, why this is important, if you're under the age of 40, you have no idea what I'm talking about. If you're over the age of 40, you feel my pain. It's because that generation, they grew up, you don't waste a thing. And what happens is if something broke, they would take the screws and the butts and the nuts and they would put it in a jar because one day you might need that. So I remember growing up as a kid, I'd have my toy break or something and my dad would go, let me see that. And he'd grab it and he'd look in his hand. He'd go, ooh, I think I have the same screw. He would disappear for 30 minutes. Truthfully, I think it was to get away from mom, truthfully. But he would disappear in the garage for 30 minutes, and he would be searching in jars trying to find the exact one. And he'd be so excited to find the screw. I don't have to buy a screw. If you're under the age of 40, yes, I know what you're thinking. How much is a screw? It's like 50 cents. You're right. We're weird, okay? We understand. But here's the point. My dad grew up in a generation that you just didn't waste anything. My dad at Christmas time, if a strand of lights went out, and I can hear my wife chuckling right now because I'm the same. If a strand of lights go out, he goes, challenge accepted. Because he will replace every light. He will replace the fuses. One year, I remember, there was a wire on the lights that was torn in half. And he sat there trying to rewire a strand of lights. And my mom is saying, you're going to electrocute yourself. And how much is a strand of lights, really? But that was my dad. I'm a lot like my dad. That's where I get my weirdness. So you can now blame my dad. The point is this, is that many of us, we need to understand our history. We need to understand our strengths, but we also need to understand our weaknesses. Because all of us, we don't have perfect parents. And we have to work twice as hard to not be like the mistakes that our parents today would say, yes, I was not good at that. We have to work hard. We can't just expect to avoid those mistakes. And Joram became just like mom and dad. He tried a little, but he fell right into the same trap. Let's continue with the story. It says this, after Ahab died, plot twist. Ahab dies. The king of Moab rebelled against the king of Israel. All of a sudden, remember the guy in Moab? Remember the guy that's sat there? And it says, so at this time, King Joram set out from Samaria. I'll get to that in a second. But you remember Moab? Remember the one who said, I'm not messing with Jezebel? I'll give you the rams and everything else like that. Well, he finds out, wait a second, Ahab died. Jezebel is no longer in the picture. I'm not afraid of his son. And all of a sudden, things change. And he decides, I'm not going to go ahead and I'm not going to send in anything. I'm not going to go ahead and I'm not going to keep the same deal. What's the point? The point is this, change always happens. Change is coming. In your life and in my life, if you're sitting there and you've had things the way it is, I would tell you this, change is going to come. And if change doesn't come, it's not because the Lord doesn't want change in your life, it's probably because you're avoiding it. Because the only thing constant in life is change. Change is always going to happen. Let me case in point. Yesterday in my house, I have 3 filters, 3 air conditioners. And in my house, my reminder went off, yes, I'm that neurotic, that it's 3 months and I need to change my air filters. So I went around the house and I went ahead and I opened them up. And when I opened up one of the air filters, I looked at it and go, this isn't that dirty. You know what? I can just dust this off. You know, I can get my little vacuum cleaner out and I can just vacuum this off. I mean, this is a perfectly good filter. That's 79 cents. I mean, I need to go. So I thought about going out, dragging the vacuum out, going ahead and just doing this. I was sitting there, I was holding on to them. I was like, this is great. Best day of my life. I don't have to throw out the filters. They're still good. Some of you really are going to walk out of the church because you're like, this guy's crazy. Yes, I know. So I'm walking around, and all of a sudden, I'm standing there, and I'm looking at this filter, and I'm literally contemplating getting a vacuum out. And I say to myself, oh, this is such my dad. This is so much my dad. And I remembered the message today. And so it took everything in me. It hurt. I walked out of the house with 3 filters that were brand newish. And I threw them in the garbage, and it hurt me. Yes, thank you for the awe. I appreciate that. It hurt. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, you're crazy. This is $1.87 that you're crying over. But remember, my dad grew up in a time period where $1.87 was a lot, and you don't dare waste anything. But here's the point. I felt how hard it was to change what I normally do. And I literally had to push myself to fight against my innate desire to do exactly what my parents did. My question to you is, how many of you don't even fight? How many of you continue to do exactly what you know that you shouldn't do because it's just easy to just succumb? If that's you, you need to know this. God is a God of change. God is a God of change. He is living water. Living water moves. It is never stagnant. And if you are the same today and you don't change, I promise you're going to start to stink. Because God's a God of living water. But you got to work hard at it. You got to push past it. So, at that time, King Joram set out from Samaria, and he said, okay, I need to mobilize all of Israel. Can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. 2 Kings 3, 6, and 7. So at that time, King Joram then set out from Samaria. He mobilized all of Israel. And then he also sent this message to Jehoshaphat. Remember the guy in the south? He said he was the king of Judah. The king of Moab, he's rebelled against me. Will you go with me to fight against Moab? Jehoshaphat said this, I'll go with you. He replied, I'm as you are, my people as your people, my horses as your horses. I love this because Jehoshaphat is like, hey, look, we're brothers. Let's go. Now, some of you Bible study students, you might find this interesting. Believe it or not, Jehoshaphat was related to Joram. They had family members that were connected. And so it wasn't just, hey, okay, we'll come fight with you. No, it was, hey, we're family, and I'm going to support family. But you know what's really interesting? Remember I said at the beginning, Joram, evil. Jehoshaphat, good. Remember I said that? How many of you have ever gotten yourself into a pickle? And when you're sitting there and you don't know what to do, what's the first thing that you do? Do you call someone who is as unwise as you are? Or do you pick the phone up and do you call someone that you think you're going to get wisdom from? Someone that hopefully can help you in the right direction. Here's my point. Those without hope, it's right here, seek those with hope in the hope of gaining hope. Those who are at their wits' end and without hope, seek those with hope in the hope of gaining hope. If you're a single adult in this room, here's the truth. You need other single adults that have hope in the hope of gaining hope. If you're a married couple in this room and you're struggling, you need another married couple that has hope so that you can hope to regain hope. If you're a senior adult in this room, you need the courage to be able to reach out and to be able to share information with another senior adult in the hope of gaining hope. Here in our church, we say this, the best way to know God is to know someone who knows God. And isn't it true in our lives? The reason why we get to a place where we feel like we don't have any hope is because we don't seek someone who has hope. That's why in our church, it's really important for some of us that are in a sweet season to be the hope for other people. And for some of you who are struggling and you have no hope, to remember there's always hope. And you can find it in other believers. So, Joram goes to Jehoshaphat. He's hopeful. I know his God. Maybe he can figure this out. And so he goes to him and says, will you be with me? Jehoshaphat says, yes. Now, this is interesting. If you love history and you like kind of battle plans, if you're a guy and you like to see strategy, watch this. Take a look. So Joram goes, all right, Jehoshaphat, by what route shall we attack? He asks. And Jehoshaphat says this, through the desert. Now, pause. I don't remember ever a time in any movie that I ever watched to say, hey, which way should we go? Let's go through the desert. That's a good idea. Doesn't seem wise, does it? But watch what he says. He says, through the desert of Edom, he answered. Here's the point. Jehoshaphat knew, hey, the Moabites, they got a lot of people. And we could lose. So let's do this. Let's do two things. Number one, we're going to be strategic. We're going to go through the desert. They're never going to expect it. But number two, it's the desert of Edom. And you know what? There's a king there who likes us. Maybe we can get him to fight on our behalf, and maybe we can join forces, and then maybe we'll outnumber them. So there were two strategies there. They get through the desert, and they go. So the king of Israel set out with the king of Judah and the king of Edom. They got him. After a roundabout march of 7 days, the army had no more water. Go figure, they go through the desert, and they ran out of water. They had no more water for themselves or for their animals. Now watch this. You ever want to see a king throw a hissy fit? Joram, evil, doesn't believe in God, looks at the other kings and watch what he does. What? Exclaimed the king of Israel. Has the Lord called us three kings together only to deliver us into the hands of Moab? Woe is me. I'm in the desert. I could have just stayed in Israel and just hung out and just let them kill me. Now I'm thirsty. Now the cattle are dying. I should have just forgot about this. He throws a hissy fit. Now watch what Jehoshaphat says. But Jehoshaphat asked, hey, Joram, is there no prophet of the Lord here through whom we may inquire of the Lord? An officer of the king of Israel answered, Elisha, son of Shaphat, is here. he used to pour water on the hands of Elijah. Now pause, don't get confused. There are two amazing, incredible prophets there's a lot of prophets, but these two are incredible. You have a guy by the name of Elijah. By the way, Elijah defeated Ahab and Jezebel. It was really great. He was a little afraid of Jezebel, I'm just saying. But Elijah was amazing. And then Elijah poured into the next prophet, which was Elisha. And Elisha did incredible things. And Elisha is close by. And so Jehoshaphat's like, wow, this is exciting. And so, next slide. Jehoshaphat said, the word of the Lord is with Elisha. So the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat and the king of Edom went down to Elisha. Now watch this. Elisha said to the king of Israel, why do you want to involve me? Why don't you go to the prophets of your father Ahab and the prophets of your mother Jezebel? Whoo, smackdown. You understand what he said? He goes, you don't believe in me. You don't believe in the God I serve. What are you doing talking to me? Why don't you go to your mom and your dad's prophets? And watch what happens. No, the king of Israel answered, because it was the Lord who called us three kings together to deliver us into the hands of Moab. Do you see what happened there? Elisha throws it at Joram, and what does Joram say? No, because it was your God who led us into this mess, and we're going to die by the hands of the Moabites. Oh, this is like soap opera biblical times. Incredible. So now watch what Elisha does. If you think all the Bible people are just perfect people, oh, you don't know the Bible. Watch what Elisha does, the prophet. Watch what he says. Elisha said this, as surely as the Lord Almighty lives, whom I serve, if I did not have respect for the presence of Jehoshaphat, the good guy, king of Judah, I would not pay any attention to you. Do you know that in modern day terms, when we say talk to the hand, it came from this? I promise, you can Google it. It's somewhere in there. Okay. Here's the point. I think Joram reflects you and I. We all laugh. Isn't it great? We read the Bible and we love to go, Joram, you're a moron. Joram, see, you're evil. Joram, you're bad. But the minute that we pause and ask ourselves the question, do I act like Joram sometimes? So I want to ask you, do you act like Joram sometimes? Have you ever sat there and have you ever gotten yourself into a pickle and you've looked at God and say, God, why am I even here? I mean, I pray to you. I mean, don't you even know I'm here? I mean, how could you let this happen to me? What are you doing, God? If you've ever done that, you're taking a page out of Joram's book. In other words, here's the point. Joram's in the desert. It's dry. It's not working. It's too tough. There's no way we can do it. Let's go back the way we came from. We can live like we once did. How many of you have ever been to that place? How many of you ever took a step of faith and said, I believe God, and then all of a sudden it gets tough and you go, it's dry. I should have just stayed where I was. Why did I even listen to you, God? If you're a marginal Christian in this room, or if you're not a Christian in this room, you know what I'm talking about. And part of the reason why you're skeptical against God is because maybe you've taken a small step of faith and it didn't work out for you, and you're like, I should have just stayed where I was. Why did I even try? I mean, I started coming to church and my life didn't get any better. I started building new relationships, it didn't get any better. And so you're like Joram right now, and you're like, you know what? Why do I even try? Now, if that's you, you're probably mad at me, and that's okay. But I want you to lean in because this is so good. Are you ready for it? 2 Kings, verse 15. Take a look. So Jehoshaphat says this, bring me a harpist. Now pause. Where are you going to find a harpist in a desert? I mean, I looked at this and I was like, Jehoshaphat, like the first thing out of my mouth was, bring me a harpist. Like, well, I don't even understand. Like, do they have harpists in the desert? I mean, can you order one in the desert? I just have no idea. By the way, that really doesn't mean anything. I just thought I'd time out and just say that. I mean, that's just not my thought. I mean, just saying. Okay. While the harpist was playing, they have harpists in the desert. That's amazing. Incredible. So if you're ever looking for a harpist, go to the desert. Okay, continuing on. While the harpist was playing, the hand of the Lord, oh Lord, you made a really crazy person. The hand of the Lord came on Elisha, and he said this. This is what the Lord says, and this is where we get serious. I will fill this valley with pools of water. Now, if you're not a Christian, I want you to hear me. We as Christians, we read past these verses, and we don't even contemplate it. But if you just read past that, you missed it. Do you understand what the Lord said? The Lord looked at these earthly kings whose cattle and animals were dying of thirst, whose soldiers were dying of thirst. All three kings were saying, we're going to die by the hands of the Moabites because we can't even fight because we're so thirsty and we're in a desert. And God looked at them and said, what are you complaining about? I'll fill this with not sprinkles of water, not a handful of water, not a puddle of water. No, you see, I am, and I'm God. And I know you see a desert, and I know you see ditches that are dry. You see those ditches? I'm going to fill them with pools of so much water you won't even fathom it. You see, I think every one of us have had ditches in our life, and they're dry, and we have already given up on those dry ditches. We've already said, God, I'm not even going to pray for this anymore. God, I'm not even going to hope for it anymore, because the truth of the matter is there is no solution for this. And God looks into your heart and mind and says, have you given up on me? Have you forgotten I am? Have you forgotten that not only can I give you a little bit water, I can pour pools of water into your dry ditch? Do you think I'm God? I will fill the ditches in the desert with pools of water. I will make a way where there seems to be no way. I will bless you if you trust in who I am. Now, here's the great thing. There are some of us in this room, we're ready to charge hell with a water pistol. Yes! But if you're like me, I remember sitting in a pew like you, and I remember listening to a pastor say that and go, yeah, that's really great, but how is that possible? How is that possible, God? I mean, how are you going to do this? And if that's you, I want you to listen to what God says next. Watch this. For this is what the Lord says. By the way, you will see neither wind nor rain. You will see neither wind nor rain. Terry, you doubt that I can do this? Do you know who I am? Not only am I going to give you pools of water, but I'll tell you what, I'm going to blow your mind. Because I'm not going to bring it the way you think that I have to bring it. You see, in your humanity, you think the only place that water can come from in the desert is from the sky. But I'm going to tell you something, I'm going to fill it, and you're not going to know how I'm going to fill it. I'm going to go, I'm going to do that to you. Because I am, and I'm God, and I'm incredible, and you have no idea the power that I have. Don't you dare put me in a box. How many of us, we have our vision of who God is and what God can do, and we put him in the proverbial box because we know better than God. So God looks and says, you're not going to see wind and rain, and I'm going to make it happen. Yet, this valley will be filled with water, and by the way, Terry, your cattle and your other animals, they'll also drink. I'm going to give you so much water that not only will you survive, but I'm going to give some for your cattle. And then if God knew the kings and he knows my heart, here's what I would do. I go, well, that's pretty impressive, but I mean, I still doubted. You still doubt me? Okay, I'm going to tell you one more thing. This is an easy thing in the eyes of the Lord. He will also deliver Moab into your hands. Oh, remember the Moabites? Oh, remember that army that is going to attack you? You're crying because you don't have water. You're crying because you're dry of thirst. Not only am I going to fill those ditches, but I'm also going to give Moab into your hands. You think I'm not God? I don't know about you, but I need to be reminded that we serve a God like that. I need to be reminded that our God doesn't fit in our box. That our God can do things that we can't fathom, but we're called to trust and have the faith to believe. Because you know what? God looked and said, you see dry ground, but beneath that desert, there's living water. Beneath your doubt, there's deliverance. Within darkness of your life, there is always light. Do you believe in me? And do you trust in what I have for you? I'm going to tell you the rest of the story, but I'm going to close. And I didn't share this the first two services. We had, for those of you that are new, we had a special called business meeting right before this service. And it was great to see our church gather together. And we'll release the results of the vote this week. But it was great to see our church gather together and just, have vision. But when we think about the questions we have for God, God, how are we going to, do this? How are we going to staff it? How are we going to build it? How are we going to maintain it? How are we going to... Those are all those questions that we have, and they're great questions. But I'm reminded that God is God. And with a small mustard seed of faith, he can move mountains. I didn't share this with the rest of the church, but I remember God had placed this on our staff's heart that we really need to expand our ministry. And so I went to one of our properties team members who's in real estate, and I said, hey, just, be on the lookout for a property that you might find, because I just am feeling this. And I thought it was going to take a year. And all of a sudden, he said, oh, that's right. And he went back to his office, and he picked up his phone, because he knew of the property that we voted on today, and he knew that it had been available, and he called, and he said, hey, is this property available? And the real estate agent on the other phone said, oh, you're not going to believe this. Today, it just went under contract. So I didn't hear back from my friend, and it had been about a few months. So finally, at a breakfast, I just said, hey, remember I mentioned something to you? I just wanted to just remind you that if you see, anything, or, oh, that's right. Well, he left that breakfast, and I didn't know this until literally 2 weeks ago. But he left that breakfast, and he went back to his office, and when he walked into his office, his phone rang. He picked up his phone, and it was the real estate agent that he once called. And that real estate agent said, hey, are you still looking for that property? Have you guys settled on anything else? Because remember the property you were looking at? Today, it just fell out of contract, and it's available. The same day, the same conversation. He came back 2 days later, and I got to be honest, I was Joram. Gee, great, that's kind of quick. Wasn't expecting that fast. I was just trying to get ahead of things, maybe next year. And the story goes, I sat on it for a few days and just prayed. God, I don't know. God, I wasn't expecting this time frame. God, and over, God, through the leadership of our church, kicked me down a path to where we sit today. Bottom line is this: God can do whatever he wants to do. If God wants another church out west, he's going to build it. And I have no doubt that he can build it, and he can surprise us. So I finished the story because some of you are like, finish the story. Okay, I'll finish it. You know what's amazing? In the morning, the armies gathered, and Moab was going to attack the Israelites. And the story goes that the army spread out, and as part of the army came forward, they looked in the distance, and they saw what seemed to be something reflecting. Because remember, they're in the desert, and there's no water in a desert. And they looked, and they said, what could that be? And they saw reflection, and what they mistaken it for is they thought that the water was blood. Because it couldn't be water, that couldn't be the liquid, because it didn't rain. I mean, where could the water have come from? It can't come because there was no wind and no rain. And so they looked and they said, it must be the rest of our brothers, the Moabite army. They must have attacked early and they must have been slaughtered. Oh no, we can't defeat them. And fear and panic gripped the Moabite army. And the Israelites, Judah, Edom, surrounded the Moabite army, and the Lord delivered them into their hands. My prayer for us, my fellow brothers and sisters, is that we don't ever put God in a box to where when we look and we start questioning, I can't be that. Don't ever doubt God. Don't ever put him in a box, because he is, I am. So no matter what dry ditch you have today, no matter what area you're struggling with today, He can bring pools of water, and he can fill it. And when you say he can't, he can. And you won't know how, and you're not supposed to because he's God. That's what it means to follow him. That's what it means to have faith. So Christian, hang on. There's living water coming, and you can celebrate. Would you pray with me? Heavenly Father, I thank you for this word, and God, I pray for my brothers and sisters who are dry. God, the issue is not with you. You're all powerful. You're amazing. You're a creator. You're incredible. The real issue is us. So God, I pray today we would grab hold of you, that we'd be strengthened in the faith, that we would know that you're bringing water, and maybe walk out of here with a hope that is everlasting. We love you. We bless you. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you.